Nothing to Prove. Chapter 6. No Longer Lonely. Based on John 4. The dust plumped up beneath my feet as I walked. The relentless rays of the midday sun finally marked more comfortably than the stares of the other women when I came for water in the morning. Each day I passed the very few people beating the heat. I stared at the cracked ground, and I have disciplined my eyes to not dart up. I was relieved to find myself alone at the well. I could draw my water in peace and hurry back home. I was so thirsty. As I lowered a leather bucket into the well, a man's voice surprised me. "Give me a drink." I looked over to see a man who was visibly tired and dirty from a long trip. He was Jewish, and we both know he shouldn't be talking to me, a Samaritan, and a woman. When I asked why he spoke to me, my cancer drew a kind, boyish grin across his face. "If you knew who I was, you would be asking me for water. Whoever drinks my water, he will never be thirsty again." I was intrigued. My daily trip to the well was satisfied with dread, with the fear of hurtful whispers, or yet again being pushed away. Many times the women would immediately leave when I arrived. Their rejection stung. Every once in a while I could blend unnoticed among the gathered crowd and listen to them laugh and share stories about the children playing nearby. Even then the loneliness stirs up in my chest, threatening to choke me. But I had to come. I had to get water and carry home to drink and cook and wash in. But it didn't ever make me feel clean. These women, they are clean. Their lives were honored and managed and tied. I wanted his water so I could no longer have to come to the well and risk the shame. But instead of giving me the water, he asked about my husband. It felt mean, as if he knew what I ached for and was holding out. My jar wasn't full yet, but I wanted to escape. I answered, "Sir, I do not have a husband." I was bothered by how dry my mouth was. If I wasn't so thirsty, I could run. "I know." "What do you know?" He sat down on the rock nearest to me, searching for my eyes that were trying to avoid him. How could he know? He is not from here. He quietly and kindly said, "You have had 5 husbands, and the man who you are with now, he is not your husband." I was caught. Everything I have run from, everything I've been hiding from, he was throwing in my face. No one knew about the other husband. They were offended enough by my current living arrangement. I had been on the run, concealing my even more past. How did he even know? "You're obviously a prophet, so maybe you can answer something for me. Where are we supposed to worship?" Everyone seems to have differing opinions about it. My back was to him as he spoke. "I know there's been all kinds of rules and places for where to worship and how to love God, but everything is going to change." There was something about the way he said it, the authority and kindness of the word, even though he knew all the shameful things I was trying my best to hide. I just had a feeling he was the one we all been waiting for. The thought terrified me. Messiah here now and talking to me? "Woman, I am he. The time has come." I knew that Yahweh had brought the Messiah to me, and he knew the worst of my mistakes. And yet he didn't despise me. I was undone by his love and the hope in his eyes. Everything shifted in me. I wanted everyone to meet him. I don't care if they saw me. I didn't care if they knew. In fact, I wanted them to know. I wanted them to know our Savior was here, and he cared about me. If he wanted someone like me, then they surely would all feel wanted too. Men came over the hills, men who seemed to know him. I left the well, left my water jars behind, and ran towards the city. Outside the market I could see the group of women with their children. I stopped. How would they know I am serious? How would they believe me? And then I did it, the most freeing, brilliant, foolish thing in my life. I led with everything I've been hiding. The streams of connection. I recently got away from a night with some friends in the hills, country of Texas. Honestly, it was one of those nights that if you looked at Instagram feed, you would have been jealous. I'm just telling you. It was a dream getaway. There are some of my favorite places, longtime friends. We shared over the 10 years of friendship and life together with those couples, and it was just easy. You probably know how difficult it'd be to make friends as a couple. It's just tricky. You just have to like the woman, and he just has to like the guy, and they have to both like you. And then your schedule has to align, and yada yada yada. Anyways, we have couple friends. And we took a dream getaway since the billion children we had produced between all of us. We sat at dinner till the restaurant closed. The waiter had set in front of us one of the most elaborate, Pinterest-worthy cheese board with 15 types of sliced meat and gorgeous cheese spread out. Second, my favorite food on the earth, next to queso and chips, is a great cheese board. Heaven will contain a lot of cheese. I think we actually preferred cheese and crackers to chips and queso, and all the Texans just clutched their chests. Because it isn't as easy to scarf down. You slow down and talk and eat and look in people's eyes. We ate and told stories. We hardly tell about nothing important. We snort from laughing too hard, like how Jess let Janet boss her around, and how obvious it is Jessie likes it. Then we quickly transferred to tears over Julie's sadness that she could no longer have more biological kids because of her weak heart. We all left feeling known, feeling seen, feeling connected, feeling less alone. I remember wondering why we don't slow down time like this, together more often. As humans, we simultaneously crave connection and resist it. The New York Times recently published an article titled "To Fall in Love with Anyone, Do This." Like everyone else who read the title, I had to know what this was that could cause any two random people to fall in love. The article is based on a study conducted by Dr. Arthur Arden, who successfully caused two complete strangers to fall in love. Two strangers sat across from each other and asked each other a series of 36 questions that started with basic things like whom you most like to share dinner with, and then gradually increased into more intimate questions like for what in your life do you feel most grateful? When did you last cry in front of another person? At the end of these 36 questions, the two strangers were to stare into each other's eyes for 4 minutes. Have you ever tried to stare in someone's eyes for 4 whole minutes? It's not a small thing to stare into someone's souls for 4 minutes, and all the while allow the person to stare into yours. It exposes you to feel seen like that. I think the risk usually proves too much. Most people look away. Connection is like that. Most people move away when it comes too close. But we are not intended to live alone, to be isolated. In the deepest part of us, it's an enormous desire to connect. We crave intimate connection more than nearly any other thing. Yet I would venture to say most of us feel a constant twinge of loneliness. People surround us. We still miss each other. We are staying in the same room in the car together and miss opportunities to really see each other, to really hear each other. We quickly move on like this amazed Jesus. Loneliness can have a strange power over us. It tricks us into believing we are the only ones who are lonely, so we stifle the desire to share our most constant nagging fears and insecurities, while nearly every other human walking around does the same. Recently, a good friend handed me a book called Becoming Human. Jean wrote in it, I discovered the terrible feeling of chaos that comes from extreme loneliness. We all have this drive to do things that will be seen by others as valuable, things that will make us feel good about ourselves and give us a sense of being alive. We only become aware of loneliness at a time when we cannot perform or when our imagination seems to fail. Loneliness can appear as a faint disease, an inner dissatisfaction, or restless in the heart. When people are physically well, performing creativity, successful in their life, loneliness seems absent. But I believe that loneliness is something essential to human nature. It can only be covered over. It can never actually go away. Loneliness is in fact essential to our humanity. Loneliness is the fundamental force that urges the mystic to a deeper union with God. Loneliness then can be a force for good. He basically says, I don't care what your Instagram says or how many friends you have on Facebook, every human being is lonely. And something about that is terrible, and something about that is comforting, called out of the hiding. As much as I adored our getaway to West Texas, a surprising thing happened. The day after we got home from the Instagram-worthy trip, I woke up and guess what I felt? Lonely. One day after I had just done the things I needed, I so craved, I woke up lonely. It wasn't because I missed them. It wasn't because I had accidentally been thinking that the perfect getaway with the perfect people and a lot of cheese was supposed to fill my soul. Somehow, I believe, if we take this trip together, it will be a memory maker. We will bond, we will have deep talks, everything I had craving. It would be amazing. And you know what? It was. It was all the things I hoped it would be. But it still did not fill my soul. Here's what I believe is happening. We are so lonely and we do not feel known. We do not feel understood. We do not feel connected to people in a really deep way because we are expecting them to feel something that only God can fill. So in our pursuit of deep connection, we have to recognize that we can often look to things like community, authenticity, confession to take place in the connecting with Jesus. Loneliness is meant to be an invitation to grow closer to God, but our tendency is to try frantically first to meet the needs of people, to prove to ourselves that we are loved and funny and worthy of attention. We are made for dependency on God. We are built for it. Because God is invisible, we put our needs on people. That becomes unhealthy 100% of the time. It's called codependency. If we connect with people and we don't connect with God, we end up asking people to be our enough. People will always eventually disappoint you. Don't be surprised. They aren't enough either. Only God has the resource and ability to exert meet in your need. Yes, we are also designed to need human relationships, but they can never be enjoyed if they are using to replace the ultimate relationship. When we begin to find our deepest, most fundamental needs in God, then we will go from using people to meet our needs to enjoying people despite the way they disappoint us. Community is meant to point us to God, not replace Him. Until we make that shift in our expectation, we continuously go back to hiding because it's too painful to be known. But we get to the illustration of sharing ourselves, a little like how the woman at the well said, I have no husband, telling a little of the truth, but not enough to reveal her brokenness. And while you and I may not be hiding from women around the well anymore, we often are hiding from being truly known. We post a version of ourselves on social media. We share a version over coffee. But does anyone really know us? Who knows that you lost your minds on your kids last week? Who knows that you haven't talked to your dad in a year because of her? Who knows that you had an abortion in college? Who knows you are sad? Who knows you are lonely? I have learned there's a difference between vulnerability and transparency. Vulnerability is the edited, disclose of personal feelings of parts of ourselves. Transparency is loosening the unedited, unfiltered, unflattering parts of our soul. I'll be vulnerable with you in these pages, but let's be fair. It is an edited version of a selected sample of my worst thoughts and moments. Vulnerability is precious and useful and can serve great purposes, and it's as far as we want to go with most acquaintances, and for sure as long as we go for Facebook. But transparency is necessary for our close friends and especially with God. It's the only way we could truly be known, but it's a scary thought that leads us into hiding. Our new hiding places include things like Instagram posts, a cute outfit, obedient kids, an organized house, a meaningful job. But no matter how we arrange on the outside, we cannot hide our eyes. Eyes reveal so much about the soul. And you know what I see? When I look into the eyes of the people I meet, people like you who are trying to do their best, I see thirst. What are you thirsty for? The woman at the well was so thirsty. She was thirsty to be seen. She was thirsty to be loved. She was thirsty to be right with people and God. She was thirsty to be whole. I think how thirsty she would have been, waiting till midday to collect her water, wishing she didn't have to go, wishing she didn't need any more, wishing that she didn't have to come out of hiding. We all wish we didn't need things outside of ourselves. We try to prove that we don't need anyone. We take pride in doing it alone and making it through a rough week without seeking help. We may barely realize it, but we are all doing that. This quote from C.S. Lewis helps why. To love all is to be vulnerable. Love anything with your heart will eventually be wrung and probably be broken. If you want to make sure it stays intact, you must give your heart to no one. Wrap it around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in a coffin or casket of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, and airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable. Yet just as Jesus built us to be in need for water and food, we are built to never be self-sufficient. Our need and thirst eventually brings us out of hiding. Then the water we choose to drink will determine whether we return to hiding or discover how to enjoy our lives again, to enjoy people and relationships again, to enjoy Him again. Jesus calls us out of hiding. Jesus calls us to taste the living water that wells up and sets us free and washes and restores. Jesus says, Let me be your enough. You will be filled, you will be known, you will be free. And your enemy pushes us back into hiding, so we cannot enjoy God and our people and eventually our lives. It is very difficult to even want to be fully engaged and present if we don't like ourselves and our lives. There's so many possible reasons that you may not like your life. Hurt, regret, burnout, demands, conflict. Something about encounter with Jesus is enough to change all that. But first, we have to come out. Like the woman at the well, we have to risk exposure. Jesus met her at the well when she risked coming out of hiding. Then he exposed her shame in the middle of the day, and it could have been the meanest thing, unless he actually had the answer to her biggest problem. Mara was born and raised in India. She grew up in a good family and married a man her parents believed to be good and respectful. The wedding was a beautiful occasion, and her mother cried tears of joy. Just days later, Mira was being physically abused. Over time, she had suffered a broken neck, cracked spine, broken teeth, and a jawbone, and more. With her theater background, she was good at masking her grief and fear. But there was no peace, sleep, or security in her life. She started to experience blackout. At first, there were minutes, and then gasps stretched into longer chunks of time. One day her abuser handed her the phone and said, Call your dad. Tell him all that I'm doing to you. She begged her husband not to make her reveal her shame. She knew it would kill her parents to know of her pain. When their father answered, she later said, It was the darkest moments of my life. At that moment, she decided to run away. She managed to flee with a few clothes and little money. To support herself, she would do street theater with street kids. Local traffickers who abused and exploited the kids thought her teaching was interfering with their business. One day, these men beat her. She fled again. The blackout continued. She ended up in a wheelchair, totally broken in body and spirit. She couldn't speak. She couldn't stop drooling. From her perspective, every shred of dignity left was lost. Eventually, she was reunited with her family, and they helped Mara to heal in many ways. Today, Mara uses notes to speak. She lost the sharp memory of the theater performer who could memorize all her lines. But when she speaks to the one who knew her, who saw her, who loved her through every one of her darkest days. My testimony is this. It was God. It is God. It was always God. Like you and everyone else sitting in this room, I want to be simple. I want a normal life. I just want to be happy. Don't you want to be happy? Then she says, maybe God didn't want something normal for me. Yes, that's a terrible story. But he's using the story that I am still struggling to be proud of, to bring me to a place where I'm rescuing slaves from bondage. Now Mara leads a team with the International Justice Mission, the world's largest international anti-slave organism. They work in nations where 11.1 million people are enslaved. And Mara and her colleagues have freed more than 10,000 people in their country alone. She bravely shared her story at IF Gathering in 2016, where she said, 10,000 names and faces I have never seen or heard of before. If my life had been totally normal and going perfectly well, 10,000 individual human beings with stories of pain turned into hope. To see her share it with boldness on the stage was breathtaking. Be that story, sisters. Let not that shame from the past restrain you. Go with joy, with confidence. Go boldly with courage. All the pain that held you back and held you there from not doing things, go with the spirit of love and compassion and righteousness, anger against justice. Just show up. Go. Sometimes we think that Jesus is mean and unloving when he calls us out of hiding, when he exposes our faults and brokenness and pain, but he calls us to be set free. The table we want. Nothing hijacks identity like fear. Fear drinks the dark narrative over our lives, over what we think we are. Fear tells us that we are defined by our worst mistakes rather than by our God, or that we are defined by our image rather than the image of the one who died for us. Satan loves the man alone. If he can isolate you, he can make you believe whatever he wants. Satan wants to shut you down and live in his lies, believing you have to hide, believing you're not enough. He wants you to focus on yourself and your problems and on your sin, not fighting for the glory of God and fighting for the souls. He wants you living in fear in the world rather than looking forward to eternity. That is for sure comforting. So he distracts you with Netflix. Downton Abbey, to be exact. You know one of the most fascinating things about Downtown Abbey? The family doesn't go downstairs very often, and the servants don't go up, except to serve. They certainly don't sit on the upstairs furniture. In the social hierarchy of the time, there's a dividing wall between the rich and the poor, those who are worthy and those who are not. Our God comes to take away the wall dividing families from servants. Our God says, guess what? You don't have to stay downstairs in the servants' quarter. Come upstairs and be part of my family and enjoy the riches and goodness of life I give to my children. This is your worth. This is your value. This is who you are. For eternity. No circumstances, no people, no mistakes, no lies in your head can steal that from you. It is true. You can believe the lies of the enemies that keeps you fearful and hiding in shadows, but it is not for 1 second shifts what is true. Our identity is secured. We are part of the family of God. But you and I too often hesitate to go upstairs and enjoy it. We stay downstairs in hiding. We know in heaven we'll be with God at his table enjoying him and all that he has for us. But for goodness sake, if we just go upstairs today and have a great meal and enjoy the gracious downtown lifestyle, I'd like to do that. You're a child of the God, adopted by the King, made to be. Are you ready for this? A co-inherit with Christ. Crazy, right? A co-inherit. Whatever Jesus Christ gets in heaven is our inheritance too. Amazing. This is our identity. Don't you know God is looking at us saying, you are my family, you are my kid? Why on earth are you hiding in the basement? And when we hide, we demonstrate ourselves. We demonstrate our worth. We demonstrate our belief in God. Maybe you believe that you're invited to the big table upstairs, but fear and suffering and pressure and shame blocks your path up the stairs. Well, I know it feels complicated, but like the one at well, we don't have to let our circumstance keep us trapped in hiding. Nothing changed that day for the woman at the well. Her circumstance were the same. Her shame has been the same. Nothing changed. Except that everything changed. Because she has a new story. Her identity shift because Jesus. The woman at the well entered a bigger narrative. She was no longer defined by her sin and weakness. God was defining her. She had nothing to prove. At the well, Jesus said in essence, I came here to get you, idolater, to get you, sinner, to get you, the most broken in the city, the one who is hiding. I came for you. You can tell the city about me. I picked you to announce salvation to the city. The Father is seeking such people to worship him, and I picked you. She heard this, and then she did something unthinkable. She ran to everyone she was hiding from. She didn't just run to them. She runs telling her about the sin. I think the Messiah is here, and he knew my sin. She leads with everything she has always tried to hide. Is she crazy? Or is she changed? Or is she free? See, the reason we hide is because we don't know what it feels to live wholly forgiven. We never know what it's like to truly enjoy our lives, to run to a crowd with no shame, no fear, no guilt, no proving yourself, no performing, just us. With the greatest news of the Savior who happened to change our lives, He arrests us with His forgiving and His grace. He absolutely sets us free. He does not need to perform. He is not here for a show. We just get to run with Him. It doesn't make sense and it's kind of messy, but it's wild and fun and what it's meant to do. When the Spirit has filled us with everything our soul craves. Being known is what happens when you realize you're already known. And because of Jesus, you're already accepted. You don't have to keep searching for what you already have. The living water that eternally quenches our soul is filling us up. In fact, Jesus is not just filling us up, it's welling up in us and pouring out of us. The living waters flood in when we embrace our identity as children of God. The living water floods in and pours when we have nothing left to prove and nothing left to hide. God is here, and now we have run in freedom and shared the worst of our lives because we are forgiven and new. Just look what it did for the woman at the well. She went from shame and hiding to being fully known and accepted. She went from avoiding people to engaging everyone around her. She went from thirsting for someone or something to fill her up to being completely satisfied. She went from wasting her life on sin to fulfilling her God-given purposes. She went from embarrassed to overflowing with joy. A sweet and wild freedom. Sudden drastic change. It still happens today. Not long after I returned with my protective shifting experience at the lodge in Canada, I was surprised to receive a phone call. It was someone I respected and liked. But when I answered the phone, I immediately was greeted with her extreme disapproval. I felt paralyzed, braced for my typical spiral into panic. But something was different. I was okay. I let go of striving and measuring up and performing, and I embraced my inadequacy and sin. I embraced Jesus' overwhelming grace. Something had changed. The usual adrenaline rush and turned someone's disapproval around didn't kick in. She called me arrogant and unwise. It felt like a fist landing down in my gut. Each punch had a turn, and each time I collected myself, I felt a strange peace and resolve. I calmly replied, I know, you're right. I am arrogant and often unwise, and I'm sorry. Will you forgive me for the hurt I have caused you? This was a sweet and wild freedom flowing out of my immediate connection to God. No defense, no hiding, no shame, no running. Yep, I am a disaster. I am caught. I am okay because I am forgiven. Today I am closer to that friend than I was before that call. It was a counterintuitive move to put it all out there because we were already caught. God knows we are prone to wander, and most days we know it too. How fun to not live trying to cover it all up. In fact, it's usually in the dirt of all that makes us human that the deepest, best parts of life and hope takes root. A sudden, drastic, awesome change. The end of pretending and protecting. The beginning of life-giving connection. It reminds us of an episode of Friends where Phoebe calls out her friend's faults and says that Monica is high maintenance and Rachel is an overpusher. They get mad and go to lunch without her. Later they approach Phoebe. Rachel says, "We are very sorry to tell you this, but Phoebe, you are a flake." Monica says, "Ha." But instead of defending herself, Phoebe threw back her head and laughed. She says, "That's true. I am flaky." It is refreshing backwards to admit our weaknesses rather than defend and cover it. It's terrifying to be caught in our brokenness, but more terrifying than being caught and being alone in the dark with all our pride and instinct. Healing and wholeness are found only when we step into the rushing streams of forgiveness, of intimacy, of connection. Step into that water. Experience, God. Be still. When I fall, I shall rise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord will be a light to me. I will bear the integrity of the Lord because I have sinned against him. Until he plead my cause and execute judgment for me, he will bring me out of the light. Micah 7:8-9. It's time to get caught because it's time you live free. It's terrifying, but God's grace is freedom replaced. But God's grace and freedom are waiting on the other side. We all live in a deep need to be fully known and fully loved. No one does that perfectly on earth. But if we never risk being vulnerable, we will never get close to be known and truly loved. Risk it. Step into the street. What is the thing you are hiding? You may feel like there is nothing too big, but all of us are hiding away sin, most often from ourselves. Ask God to show you any impure motive or sin that you may not be aware of. Wade in deeper. Even more terrifying is confessing this to someone, but it's part of being free. Share that sin you are hiding with a noteworthy person, someone gracious and safe. Remember, you're not alone. Around the world, thousands of women are doing this too. Quench your thirst. Gather some friends, safe people who have proven their love for you over time, and build a fire in a fire pit. As you sit around the fire, share your stories, all the parts, including a messy one. Tell them you want them to know the mistakes you made and the grace you are now experiencing. See what happens. I bet you will be around that fire for a while. I bet your honesty will cause a ripple effect, giving permission to share their sins. I'm praying for all of you as you bravely go there. The overflow. Write a thank you note to your friend who has shared vulnerability with you and tell that friend how it impacted you. Until next time, talk soon.